Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News. Please remember to like the video and to make sure that you are still subscribed. And thank you all for your comments and discussion as usual. I wanted to start this video off talking about the XR hunger strikes. Newsletter 32, yet my hunger for change propels me. I'm actually not going to do this. So I want to cover the latest release from Extinction Rebellion. Day 15, hunger strikers begin third week with further meetings with political leaders. This is from yesterday. 5 Extinction Rebellion activists continue their hunger strike for the third week outside political party headquarters until party leaders meet them to discuss the 3 Demands Bill and act now on climate and ecological emergency. And the UK is having an election December 12th. That's next week. Green Party senior leadership met with hunger strikers for 1 hour. Is it next week? I guess it would be next week. Green Party senior leadership met with hunger strikers for a 1-hour meeting. Hunger strikers appealed to the public to put pressure on political parties to support the bill. The global hunger strike highlights the realities we all face in this emergency, including vulnerabilities to food shortages and acts in solidarity with those already suffering. Five Extinction Rebellion activists continue their hunger strike for the third week outside political party headquarters in London to put pressure on party leaders to meet them to discuss the climate and ecological emergency bill known as the 3 Demands Bill. If everybody doesn't know what that already is. Today, hunger strikers met senior leadership with the Green Party of England and Wales, Amelia Womack, Deputy Leader Mary Clegg, David Flint, for a 1-hour meeting to discuss their support for 3 Demands Bill. The hunger strikers reiterated the need for us to tell the truth about our vulnerability to looming food shortages, and the Green Party reiterated their support for citizens' assemblies. They said, Extinction Rebellion are doing so much to draw attention to the climate emergency, bringing the need for urgent action to the forefront of people's consciousness. 3 weeks of hunger strike. That is a long time. Update from global climate hunger strike around the world. The global hunger strike highlights our current and future food vulnerability in the climate and ecological emergency and act in solidarity with those already suffering. More than 500 people signed up in 28 countries, many on 24-hour fasts in support of the Extinction Rebellion hunger strikers. In Australia, Dave McKay has been on hunger strike for 15 days on the steps of Parliament House in Melbourne, asking 12 members of Parliament to meet him and discuss support for declaring a climate emergency in the state of Victoria. Dave has spoken to 3 MPs so far, with an email from a 4th. He got an email. In Israel, Shadi Soror began his hunger strike and is on day 20. Demanding the Israeli government take serious action on climate change and the ecological crisis by supporting the 3 Demands Bill. Let's hope that this brings about some kind of action. I haven't seen anything yet, or it doesn't look like there's been a major break in any kind of recognition from governments around this. It doesn't look like they're saying that anything definitive has been done or agreed to. But watching this and hoping that this creates some kind of space for more awareness. Moving on to this article, I wanted to read, which I kind of skimmed through, but didn't read every word of this. This is from the New York Times, and this is from November 14th, so a little while ago, 2019, titled "Sanders' Climate Ambitions Thrill Supporters, Experts Aren't Impressed," by Lisa Friedman. Senator Bernie Sanders' $16 trillion vision for arresting global warming would put the government in charge of the power sector and promised that by 2030, the country's electricity and transportation systems would run entirely on wind, solar, hydropower, or geothermal energy. That is fairly robust and far-reaching. He has the most far-reaching climate plan of all of the candidates. There are obvious, problems with it, but at least he's, his is a major step forward. And of course, what most in America on the mainstream media or in politics would call, radical. And yet, by climate activist standards, or those who are aware of the climate, how far and deep the climate crisis has gone, obviously these are not radical enough. So pick your poison. The fossil fuel industry would be footing the bill, much as Mexico was to pay for the border wall. That's an interesting tie-in that they made there. Climate scientists and energy economists say the plan is technically impractical, politically unfeasible, and possibly ineffective. Yet the criticism does not appear to bother many of the young voters who will have an important role in selecting a Democratic presidential candidate and who overwhelmingly place climate change at the top of their priority lists, according to the polls. And let's, well, we do know that if the Democratic Party does not bring out young voters in this election, they are going to lose again. And younger voters are the ones that are aware of the climate crisis and who not only want radical change politically or economically from a candidate, they also want action on climate change. And Bernie Sanders is the one who would deliver on all of those issues. Bernie Sanders, of course, leading in polls with young people, hands down. So, if anybody out there has any doubts as to who, if they're on the Democratic side, if they have any doubts as to who to support, who would beat Trump and get out the greatest number of voters and, inspire the base, if you will, inspire younger voters who want action on this, Bernie Sanders is the one to support. And I just wanted to say I had an interesting conversation today where it's talking about overpopulation, or the subject of overpopulation or having children. Interestingly, though, what I realized in this conversation was it is the young people who seem to be willing and ready to take action on climate change. And as much as we, want to have a conversation around overpopulation, and I think that it's a valid and necessary conversation, and Bernie Sanders is, again, one of the only candidates that's willing to bring up the issue of overpopulation as it relates to climate change. And it does relate to climate change. However, interestingly enough, it is the youth who are leading the fight, who are leading the action on climate change. It's the older generation, the older people who are sitting around going like, hope somebody wants to take some action soon on this, or it's all over, guys, so just give up. That's the messages that I hear from, not 100% across the board, but that is the message I hear from a lot of the older folks. And it is the youth, it is the young who are out in the streets, who are shutting things down, who are shutting down schools, who are walking out of schools, who are camping outside of congressmen's doors, who are insisting that, this is the time to take the action. So I don't know, put that in your pipe and smoke it, or put that in your bonnet and think about it. I don't know. Where would we be without the youth? He has some really great ideas that may not be passed, but it's definitely stuff that needs to be brought up, said Chandler Condone, a 25-year-old supporter who traveled from Denver to Des Moines last week for a climate rally with Mr. Sanders. People saying that it's too radical, excuse me, it's like, well, we need that radical change, she said. David Victor, a professor of international relations at the University of California, San Diego, and a climate advisor to Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, called that the big challenge for serious policy in the Democratic Party. The progressive wing wants radical change, and climate change is one of those areas where this has really been the most palpable. He said the Sanders plan claims to deliver radical change, but it can't work in the real world. Oh, really? Mr. Sanders is not a newcomer to the climate issue. He has spent decades fighting largely unsuccessfully for ambitious legislation to increase clean energy, reduce carbon emissions, and end fossil fuel subsidies. He distinguished himself in the 2016 Democratic primaries by calling for a tax on carbon emissions and declaring global warming a national emergency. That was in 2016. And on the debate stage in this election cycle, he has called climate change the number one, the biggest issue that needs to be dealt with. Mr. Sanders seems to have cemented his status as the climate candidate with the most expensive plan and an early embrace of the Green New Deal and rally last weekend with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Green New Deal's most prominent champion. On Thursday, Mr. Sanders and Ms. Ocasio-Cortez introduced a 10-year, $180 billion Green New Deal for public housing, the first major effort to bring the vision of grappling with both climate change and income inequality into legislation. The bill would provide for retrofitting 1 million units of federally owned housing. Many critics are... So what I heard in this last statement about it can't work in the real world, those are just words. That's like Michael Mann saying, it's just not true that we're heading for this climate crisis or this catastrophe in the near future. Why? Why is that true? What models do you have to say that isn't true? What's the evidence? Please, let us in on this grand knowledge that you have. The Sanders climate plan can't work in the real world because we don't want it to. We won't let it. We are just going to keep saying it's impossible, so then everybody will, understand that it's impossible. Of course, it won't work if that's what everybody thinks. Many critics are working from a set of pessimistic establishment political assumptions that will frankly result in disaster, he said. The current model is unsustainable, and it's wrong to assume that the plan accepts the status quo in terms of the costs and technology of today. There you go. That was from Joshua Orton, a spokesman for Mr. Sanders. He said critics were failing to see that momentum is already moving toward dramatic action. Indeed, it is. And as with the other issues at the heart of the progressive agenda, or Bernie Sanders' agenda, we'll just call him the progressive agenda, basically you just have a lot of mainstream status quo corporate opposition. No, these things aren't going to work. They're radical. They're too crazy. But if you don't actually, there's enough people, I think, that are on board with these ideas that really want to see these ideas happen. And if they don't get these ideas, if they're thwarted in their efforts to gain ground on these ideas, then you're going to be in real trouble, because you're going to have people that are very, very angry. And you're going to move one step closer to having, people in the streets, a yellow vest scenario in the United States, or, having much more aggressive, assertive protests going on in the streets, and not just friendly climate marches on Fridays. His rejection of nuclear energy and technology to capture carbon emissions would make his carbon reduction targets much harder. His notion of paying for renewable energy by making the fossil fuel industry pay for their pollution is vague, is it? That seems pretty concrete. Economists said his climate plan fails to consider his larger agenda, such as a new infrastructure projects in his economic plan that would create a burst of new emissions. High-speed rail, wind turbines, and mass transit need steel and concrete, the production of which requires energy. Okay, so that is actually true. But, that's not a reason to just... So we can't do it. We're just going to keep doing the things that we're doing. What are your alternatives to this? If you say, well, we don't, this is bad, we're not going to offer any kind of, thoughtful alternatives or another plan or another way to do this. He's trying to set a marker in terms of pace and scale of spending that he's proposing. I don't think that represents a very nuanced understanding of the set of challenges that we face. This is from Jesse Jenkins, an energy systems engineer, an assistant professor at Princeton University. Okay. What is your... Okay, moving on to Paul Hawken, the author of Project Drawdown, which analyzes solutions to global warming, said his sense of urgency in here is correct, in my opinion, but you can take that sense of urgency and make it more effective. Indeed, that's well thought out. Joel Payne, a Democratic strategist, said Mr. Sanders was more focused on signaling his ambitions to the party's liberal wing than sweating policy details. That's bullshit. That's an actual lie. Stop it, Joel Payne. People who care about these issues, his plan is the most, comprehensive, well thought out. It isn't a framework, as people like Elizabeth Warren, one of the words she likes to use is, in reference to medical care for all. This is the most comprehensive plan out there. People who care about these issues want a warrior, Mr. Payne said. Whether or not the battle plans they draw up exactly check out is kind of beside the point. Well, yeah, somebody's got to do something. But we can't fight for it because, the plan is just not well thought out enough. Okay. Well, think it through then. Give us your alternative, please. Mr. Sanders' plan envisions expanding the 4 existing federal agencies that market electric power, known as the Federal Power Marketing Administrations, as well as the Tennessee Valley Authority, a government-owned corporation. He would create a 5th such agency that would spend $1.52 trillion on developing renewable energy and another $852 billion on technology like advanced batteries to store energy for days when the sun does not shine or the wind does not blow. So yeah, the way to go forward is to say, how about we go forward and let's, get the best ideas possible. Not, it just can't work. Oh, it's just too radical. Yeah. But if we don't take radical action, as is said over and over and over and over again by not just climate scientists, not just climate experts, not just climate communicators, but all, you also have Extinction Rebellion and Greta Thunberg, and you have people, climate activists, who are saying, come on, guys, we're on hunger strike over here because we need some action. And Bernie Sanders calls for a moratorium on the renewal of nuclear power plant licenses. Because he lives in the real world, because he lives in reality. Nuclear power is not the way out. Nuclear power is extremely dangerous, and if you're talking about the possibility of a climate catastrophe, of an economic collapse or a climate collapse, you don't want a bunch of nuclear power plants melting down. You'd have to address that pretty effing quickly. Anyways, so basically they're trying to shoot this down, or muddy the waters about how this is going to work. Finishing up this article, Zena Precht Rodriguez, 23, an activist with the Sunrise Movement, a youth-led climate change group, traveled from Philadelphia to speak at the Des Moines rally last week. She said it's important to have faith. It's not necessarily proved that it's impossible because it's never been tried, she said. Right. Exactly. We put, we're willing to put money into all kinds of other technologies, destructive technologies. We don't even question it. 5G, fracking, new and improved nuclear warheads, or whatever, new military armaments, whatever it might be, better phones, robots. We don't question that. We're just like, hey, let's just spend a little money on this and see where it goes. But no, we can't do that with climate change, because it's too radical. Anyways, just wanted to read that and give you my thoughts. Please give me your thoughts, if you will, in the comment section. Somebody, please do something. That's all that Extinction Rebellion is asking for. That's all that Greta Thunberg is asking for. That's all that climate scientists are asking for. All the climate scientists that are at COP25 right now. These are the things that people have been saying over and over and over again for decades. And now there's a movement and awareness enough to do something, to make some movement on this. So we're going to have to just get the football, stick the arm out, the fuck out of the way while we do something. Just stop, all those people who are like, no, don't do it. Stop talking about it. Stop trying. Okay, just get out of the way of the people that are trying in the meantime. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so with the links below. Until next time, peace.